Cool. So everybody has their laptops open, right? Cool. What we're going to do is we're actually going to use something called GitHub. Who here has heard of GitHub? Raise your hand. Yeah? Who here thinks GitHub's really scary because there's all this fancy stuff and you gotta like, what's this downloading this and checking in that and checking out this and updating this and what's a repo and all this stuff? We're gonna simplify things for you. So it's gonna switch over to the, yeah, perfect. So if you go to github.com/HTML-Toronto, there is something called a repository there, a very popular one I might add, that says popular repositories, and it's really the only one. So we click on that, and what we're going to do is we're going to see this giant list of files that are there. Cool? What we're going to do is we're going to say, download the zip file, which is at the very, very bottom, right down here, the very bottom corner of download zip file. Cool? That's going to download a fairly decent size chunk of files that we're going to be working with, at least for a little bit, that you can use to get started. So raise your hand if you have already finished downloading. Raise both hands if you have not. Everybody raise their hands, by the way. I'm going to give you a minute for that. And for those of you that are wondering, what's this license thing we're talking about here? The license is essentially, you can do whatever you want, anything your heart desires, with a page that looks like this. Do we have it downloaded now?
Still downloading.
No, still downloading? Okay, that's fine. We've got a couple files in there that are a bit bigger, and there's a little saver for later. We'll get to those in a minute. I'm sure BitMaker's bandwidth cap is loving us right now. Our mentors are, actually, this is a great time to talk about the mentors that we will have walking around. There are several people that will be walking around throughout the evening that will be able to help you and answer, hopefully, any questions that you have. These people are going to be, they're here on their own time, so say thank you to them if you get a chance. I'm going to bring them up afterwards or whenever I can get the chance later, probably between sessions while we're hooking things up, to let them give a brief introduction on who they are. But a big thanks goes out to them for coming out here on their own time to help you guys out for this. And if you have any questions or advice or need a hand with anything, please raise your hand at any point during this, and I'm sure they will be right over to help you with it. Cool? Sorry. Everybody have it downloaded now? No? Raise your hand if you don't. A lot of people. Is it downloading though? Yeah? So it's just a bit slow. So having a very large media file in there probably wasn't the best of ideas. My bad. On that note, while that's downloading at least, we can get started. So we don't need the files technically to listen to me talk about the files, because we'll see it online. So who here is familiar with the structure of HTML? Yeah? Few people not. Good. Everybody, like, who's an expert at it? Raise your hand. Exactly. I saw one hand. Show off. Cool. So let me walk through some of the code, some of the structure, and how to see this. First and foremost, I want to make sure everybody can see this, correct? This is a very visible thing for everybody, even at the back? Yeah? Yes? No? Not at all? Let's see if we can change that by making it say Obsidian. Is this better at all? A little more? Nando? Is this better for everybody? Yeah? Cool. No, I want to make sure everybody's able to see this. So first and foremost, we have this doc type up here. Now I'm jumping right in. Unfortunately, my highlight's not going to work very well on this screen with this theme. Yeah, that's not going to work for you at all. Let's see if we can go for a night. That's kind of not even readable. Sorry, I thought I had one that was going to be readable at the back, but unfortunately, the highlight doesn't work for that one. Does that one work? Yeah? Okay, and you can't really see the highlight, but I can at least direct you to the line. So, getting started. HTML is essentially a markup language, right? What that means is that it contains information for a browser or accessibility device or a mobile phone to understand, and even in some cases, an actual operating system to understand how to structure content and give definition to content. Okay? It marks up what that content is. It's a markup language. Cool? So the intent of HTML was to create a standard for people to code towards that will be globally accepted. HTML5, thanks to the name of the group, is the next phase of evolution of this language. It is a standard of a bunch of more tags for semantics, JavaScript capabilities and controls, CSS features and attributes with values that can do different things with the code to make it look prettier, as well as some more advanced stuff like connecting two computers together at the same time to talk with one another, or saving memory or saving content to your computer, even though you're not online, you can still browse some sites. Those are the new features of HTML5 under that brand. The code, or the stuff that we'll be doing today, is a lot of the semantic tags, right? How is it that you define your content? You're building a website, you're building it for a reason. You want people to understand who you are and what you do, right? So semantic text allows you to code in a way or put that onto a page that makes it so that search engines, browsers, accessibility devices will be able to read that and understand what certain areas are, right? So I'm going to go through a little bit of the method in which you have a document structure and how a document looks, as well as some of the tags and all of the tags that you'll need to know to properly mark up your site and who you are. So first and foremost, brand new to HTML5 is this new doc type. We used to have this really, really long doc type that would probably almost cover the full length of this window. But instead of having all of that, which was like, oh, use this for reference, and use this for reference, and this is the doc type, and here's the character encoding, and all this fanciful stuff, we now have a giant thing that says, hey, doc type, HTML. That's it, right? So you guys are coming in at a great time. You don't have to write, remember, and have, okay, if it's this browser, do this, if this browser, do this. Okay, no. This one, simple, exclamation mark, doc type, which is just saying ignore the tag. The exclamation mark is like a comment thing. It's an HTML document. That's it. So just remember, this is the first line you should have in everything you do that's an HTML site. It can pretty much be a template for you. The next one is a containing element. These semantic tags, or this HTML tag, is essentially, yes. If I write in HTML close, right? I need to close this out to be a complete document, right? What that means is I'm opening this up by saying, hey, these little square or these little diamond brackets there, that is the type of tag I'm using. And then I have a giant area here that I can put something in the middle of. Everybody used to XML, right? Everybody know what XML is? No? XML is essentially that. You have a containing element that has different features. Yes?
Sorry, does anyone have a flash key? Who got somebody who can't connect?
We have somebody that can't connect. Does anybody have a flash USB stick? Cool. Awesome. Thank you for that. So, to get started, XML is essentially this. Every time you create a brand new tag, this here is a tag. Like if I wanted to create a head tag, which we will get into what that is, I would say that is a head tag, right? It is now inside an HTML tag, right? Because the slash at the end of this, or the beginning of the first tag, that means it's closing. Right, so you have an opening tag, which is the first one at the top. We just move this down. There. So you have an opening tag and a closing tag, and you have something in the middle, which is also a tag. Everybody following along? Yeah? Cool, simple enough. So HTML runs by having the top level tag, remember the doc type is ignored, or not ignored, but not included in this. An HTML tag at the top, and all the way at the bottom, we have a closing HTML tag at the bottom. Now you probably can't see those at the back, you can't see this at the bottom, but trust me, it's there, I promise you. After that, you'll notice that we have something in this tag. Everybody see this? It says lang equals n. Who here knows what this is? Everybody understand what lang equals n means? Raise your hand. Nobody cheating. I'm going to say the person that was leaning on their hand looking out the window. The language is English. It's 100% right. Very simple, very straightforward. Hey, this is HTML, and the language of the whole contents is English, which means being in Canada, if you have a French site, what would you use instead of EN? FR for French. Exactly. Simple enough, right? So you can tell the browser now, hey, this site is in French or this site's in English. Who here's been to a website in Chrome or whatever and said, oh, this site is run in German. Would you like us to translate this for you? Raise your hand. Yeah? This is where you can actually put that in so that your site, if it's in French or English, to another browser will instantly say, hey, I notice it's in this language, but you don't speak this. Would you like me to translate it? This is how you can set that very easily. So instead of the browser auto-detecting, it says, I know this site's in this language. Next thing up, we've got something called a head. Now, this head is one of the foundations of where HTML started. It allows all the content in this to be loaded as a definition to say, hey, to get started with the page, you need to do all these different things, right? So we've got a bunch of instructions here on the head of the document to perform. Download this file, download that file. This is the name of the file, so we have title equals header bar, right? So if I open this page up, you'll notice at the very top of the page, I have do not, let me turn on accessibility. And apparently there's a fire outside because there's alarms going off. System preferences, accessibility, zoom, and use keyboard shortcuts. Amazing. Cool. So at the very top, because I have the word title equals, it'll go in a second. Wait for it, snap. Okay, apparently you guys are slightly behind me. Oh, I know why, because the video signal doesn't go actually out. Unfortunately, I can't zoom with the video signal. Cool. So at the very top of the page, you're going to see header bar, right? It says header bar. If I change in brackets here, change this to HTML5 Toronto, and save this, refresh, it now says HTML5 Toronto in the actual header bar of the browser. Cool? Round of applause for the browser. Yay, it understands me. I do. Cool. So that's how you set the title bar of that. You're essentially setting the document title, like what you would when you're creating a Word document or anything else. You would set the title document, or the document's title of the file. Next couple here are essentially just some cleanup code. For instance, character encoding. Who here has ever opened up a Word document or a text document and all the accents are wrong? It's this weird diamond shape with a question mark in it or something strange, right? Accents are weird. That's because what's called character encoding is wrong, right? Or it's been lost. What we're doing for the next one, we're setting a character type of a standard UTF-8. I'm not going to go into details of what UTF-8 versus ISO and all that stuff is. You will have the code for this. Copy and paste this, save this for your records, use this every time you do a project. I'd recommend probably doing that every time. Just add that in there, you'll be safe. Next thing, comments. Remember how we said at the very top here we had this doc type HTML and it had that exclamation mark in it? Because it acts similar to a comment. We have this down here with this if lt IE9. Does anybody know what that would mean? Raise your hand if you know what it means. Greg, you're cheating. No cheating. Yes, in the middle, right in the back. Nope. Yep, you. Exactly. If the browser is less than IE 9, which means that if it's IE 8, 7, 6, do the stuff that's in the center. And again, remember we said, well, this one's a bit easier. End if, right? Very simple bit of programming for you, but at least it's there. End if. Anything in there. So if we wanted to load a JavaScript file or a CSS file just for a single browser, this is where you would do it. You would just put that there, like you would know. And these things can be these links, right? So we have a link. This link is for CSS files. So again, it's another tag. The difference between this tag, however, is you'll notice that there's no closing tag. Did we see that? There's no closing tag for this. We only have link, and it stays here. And also at the end, we have that weird little slash thing that we always have at the end of a tag, right? That's because there's certain tags that don't need that closing thing because it'll never have anything in the middle of it, ever, right? So because that doesn't need that, we can save a little bit of memory or a little bit of file size by just throwing that at the end of it. Now, technically speaking, you can do that to any tag, but don't. If you see different things, this link, you can absolutely get away with doing it for this link because it'll never have anything in the middle. Things later on we'll show you do always need it, that you'll need that closing tag or that closing slash. So for link, by the way, you'll learn a little bit more a little later on. That's for CSS files, for styling your interfaces. So the other thing you can do in here as well is a style tag. Again, you'll be getting into that with some of the CSS later, but that style, instead of you having an external file to save all your CSS in, you can put the CSS in the header. Now, don't do what Johnny Don't does by putting your CSS in the header if you can change, if you don't have to, right? Unless you have to do it by different means or you're coding for WordPress, try to avoid doing things in the header like the style, but you can. Cool. The next thing is the body. The body tag is where all the gold happens. That's where you get all the fun stuff, right? This is where all of your content goes. So you'll see here, my awesome page, a bunch of articles, some headers, some gibberish, and my name and the date. What that ends up being is all of this stuff is all within the body, right? This is all your content. That's you. We've already done all the stuff that says, hey, do this, do that, do this, load this file, all these different things. This is all the good stuff, though. This is where the browser says, hey, all this stuff that's going to be searchable, that's where you want this stuff coming from. Cool? Everybody know what the body tag is? We'll be going over some of the tags. Probably going to take a bit of a 5-minute break to get up, because it's been apparently half an hour for this, and I did not think it was going to take this long, so I'm going to try to speed through some of the stuff. But this is where all the good stuff happens for the tags. That's how to structure a body. So if we go back to the code now, we'll notice that the body tag contains a bunch of tags, which we'll go through some of them in a moment. And then it closes out, and then you close the HTML. Right? Remember how I told you at the back? Can't really see the bottom, unfortunately. Actually, let me just raise this up just a bit for you. Right? See, I promised you, didn't I? I said it closed. The body and the HTML tag both close out. That's it. That's an HTML page, right? As simple as saying, if I go through and I delete all of the stuff in the body, good, right? That's a full site. Technically, I don't even need this stuff. That is a full website. Pretty cool, right? Now, I'm probably going to get some hate mail for this, but I'm going to show you a way not to structure your content. Are you ready for this? I'm going to teach you guys how not to do something. Does everybody see a header tag there? How about a body tag? Character encoding? Don't do this. Is he here still? Where is it? Awesome. Always, 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 for the love of all that is holy in Gutenberg, make sure you structure your content properly. Without properly structured content, Google, Bing can't search you, won't know who you are. And if it does, it's because it got lucky. Cool. So with that said, I'm going to say stand, everybody, don't close your laptops because then they'll have to all boot up. But first and foremost, does everybody have the files downloaded now? Yeah? Awesome. Okay. So put the laptops on the desk or somewhere, stand up, put your arms as far in the sky as you possibly can, just to stretch one bit, because we've done that for about 30 minutes now. We want to make sure that you're nice and ample for the next section. Go grab a piece of fruit as well. Fruit and veg help the brain grow.
Oh, and the washrooms if you want to add.
Gonna get started again? Everybody's got their nutties and munchies and all the fun stuff here. Everybody bring a piece of paper like it said on the meetup page, right? Raise your hand if you brought a piece of paper. Awesome, you guys are amazing. For everybody else, I'd recommend opening up a text editing document. There's probably a few things you'll want to write down for the next little bit. Cool. So what we're going to do is we're going to run down some of the code and some of the tags that we remember. Now remember, tags are essentially ways of defining context. Does everybody understand what that is? It's a hard thing to describe really without. When you have an HTML tag, for instance, in this case, we're actually starting with a great topic here. H1 through H6. So if you know what those are, H1 through H6, they're headers. Cool. Now, if you've ever seen this on a browser, this is what you'll generally see. In fact, the code from this page is this, right? So you'll see header level 1 is this massive thing with a bunch of room at the top and bottom. Header level 2 is subsequently smaller, and again, it just goes gradually down to smaller, smaller, smaller. Now, who here thinks you use header level 1 to make big text? Raise your hand. Right? Everybody who didn't raise their hand is right. Everybody who did raise their hand is wrong. That is not what the header level tags do. This is what the browser says, hey, you didn't add any styling to this via CSS, so this is how I'm going to show it, because this is how I think it should be seen. Header levels, the H1 through H2, are importance of the information. The header tag is, hey, the content of this piece of information is the most important thing in the document, which means anything in the H1 tag is the most important thing in the document. And if you're making an about page for yourself, what do you think that is? What do you think the most important thing on that page is? Raise your hand. Yes. It is your name. Absolutely. The most important thing on your about page is your name. Or email address if you want to put content playing on. But second most important thing, third most important thing, all of these things are defined by their header levels. Now, there's a bit of, I don't want to say debate, but mess up between coding developers that I'm going to give you guys a little secret on, so long as you don't tell anybody. People have, in my opinion, made a huge mistake in how they created header level tags. The semantics, and if we look back at the documentation for a lot of this stuff, say, on a single page, all things of H1 on the whole page are the most important thing. If you look in some of the coding practices that people have done over the last hundreds of years, they've been doing it so that it's the header levels in certain areas. So if you have a certain area of your website that has a header level 2, that's the most important thing for that section, right? If you have it in a different section, that might be a completely different perception, and it might not be as important as it is in the first one, but it's still a header level 2. But it's giving it the same value because it's the document 1. So, in regards to the importance of information, take it with a grain of salt. You should use what you prefer. It can either be document-wide, which I prefer. You have a giant document of all this information. H1, most important thing on the page, doesn't matter what else there is on this page. H2, second most important thing. H3, third most. wherever that information leads. As an example, if I run a blog, if I have a blog on there, the name of the blog is the top one, which is H1. Second most important is likely the title of each one of those blog posts, right? Third most important, maybe the author, the date, something along those lines to categorize things out. But in other people's in WordPress and Drupal and all these different things, some of them have done it so that on the sidebar, the header levels of those sections of the sidebar are something like H2 or H3, which means in some cases, that's being even higher value than the author of the articles that are on there, even though it's like, oh, it's the header of where the sponsors are. Sponsors are great, but I'm valuing the people that are writing the articles more than the sponsors, right? That's my importance, is the content. Sponsors are awesome, and they'll absolutely get a 5 or a 6, because that has to be in there to say there is an important level in that. But that's not the top few levels there, right? So that's how you have to concentrate on how you're semantically saying, here's the content, here's the tags that represent that content, and the importance of them on my site. Does that make sense, everybody? Yeah? Cool, I'm glad. If I look at anybody's site and I see H level 6 here for the title, I'm gonna scream. Awesome. So, next level, next thing here, very, very quick one. It's one of those ones as well that has no closing tag here. There's never going to be any content inside a horizontal rule. Now we're going to take a look at this one by one. I'm going to skip some of them and hopefully go through a bunch of them. Header level here, the text, or this one here, is this, right? It's a horizontal rule. It's just a line that goes across the screen. Fairly straightforward, but believe me, it comes in handy when you're trying to divide up content. There's not really semantics to it. In fact, browsers know to ignore the tag, which is why you use it. You want to divide up content visually, this is how you do it. Next thing we have up to line here is a div. Everybody know what a div is? Wait, it says right there. Div. It's a division of content. And in this case, as you'll see, it contains what's known as a span, or span of content. Fairly straightforward, right? Really simple. Div is division, span is span. Cool. A div, by default of the browser, and again, we'll be able to change this in CSS afterwards, by default, takes up the width, the full width of whatever it's contained within. So as you'll see here, it takes up the, if I double click on this, it takes up the whole thing all the way across. That's what a div will do for you. Okay? I'll show you an example of what doesn't do that in a moment. The span, however, and you'll see a bit more of this tool over here a little later. This tool, if I right click and I say inspect element, you'll notice that if I highlight the div, right, I'm highlighting a div on the right hand side. That's my piece of code. Let me zoom into this and hide this. That's not what I want to hide. Bring that down. If I go down and I highlight the div, right, it's highlighting the whole width. If I highlight the span, it highlights the span. Okay? Div, that's the span, that's the div. That's the difference between the two. All you do is you're saying this little section. You can change that later. You can always say later on, hey, the div, I want to just contain a little bit. The span, I want to contain the whole thing. We'll design that later. Next thing up, we have a P tag. Anybody know what a P tag stands for? Paragraph. You've probably seen that from Word. Very simple. Paragraphs can have a space before and a space after. They act the same as a div. But what's the difference between a div and a paragraph semantically? Does anybody want to take a guess at that? If nobody knows, that's fine. A div is just a division of the content. It generally contains a bunch of different things inside of it. Whereas a paragraph contains a paragraph of text. Make sense? So now you're actually saying, hey, this content, this is a paragraph of text. Yes? Yes. The span tag doesn't act, and semantically is not a paragraph. A span tag is an area of text that has no context to it. The div and span provide no context to the content at all. They are just containing elements that allow you to adjust the content dynamically or in CSS and design-wise later. So semantically, no. In fact, that is not the case. Div and span do not define a paragraph. Does that make sense? So line break, in regards to line break behavior, span can if you tell it to in CSS, but by default, it does not at all. Sorry, thank you. That was a good question. So, next up, who here's been to a website that you filled out a form? I'll give you a hint. You probably did it already today. Have you filled out a form? Forms are put in by forms. Now, I'm not going to go too deep into forms and how they work because that's PHP and that's coding and server-side and CSS. Forms are generally just, you have a bunch of form elements, like in this case, inputs, selectors, and buttons. So we have input, like a text input here. Number inputs, so you can only put in numbers. In fact, you can use your arrow keys up and down, left and right to do that. Anybody ever been on a phone, you push something, and it's like, oh, it brought up a number pad instead of a text field. It's because the person who coded it is awesome. They use type equals number, right? You be awesome too. If you ever need to build something that requires a number, like a phone number or an address, make sure you use number. If you need a date, use the term type equals date. This is built into the browser. This date picker built into browser. Awesome, right? It's really cool to see that. Unfortunately, not all browsers support some of these functions. I wanted to make sure that I showed you guys everything. So if I open the same page up in Safari, the all ever loved Safari, you'll notice that yes, numbers work. Date, however, doesn't. I can put in text in here. Right? That's not good. That's not good at all. In fact, iOS 7 that just was released removed a lot of the date functionality from the browser themselves. So keep that in mind. Although most of the browsers, a lot of the modern browsers now allow you to have these brand new tags and say, hey, this type, know that older browsers might default just back to text, which is fine. It just, you'll need to provide some form of validation later. So I'm not going to go too deep into what types there are. If you want to see what other types there are for text type, for input types, there's a link at the bottom of this page as well you can go to and take a look. Select types, everybody's seen a pop-up box, right? That's where you select a bunch of bits from a list. You have nice little buttons, which just does nothing on this page here. And then what's really cool, you have progress bars. You have one that you can say 0 to 100% on, as well as the annoying one that's like, I'm moving a file. It's about a minute from done. 3 minutes later, right? That's built into the browser. There's no custom CSS, there's no design with this. That's standard. That's called a meter. Sorry, progress. That's in progress. Meter is a different one that we'll get in. I'm not going over for this one because I wanted to show you some of the basics that would likely be. So we have all the header tags, some of the form ones, and then progress. The other thing I wanted to show you, which I didn't find out until tonight, that a lot of people have not known about or not known properly, is something that's been in HTML for ages, which is called the label tag. Anybody heard of a label tag? Yeah? A few people. You'll notice down here, let me put this up here, there is an input label, right? It's down here. Now, if I've got this, there's an attribute saying for a text input that's all the way through. If I click on this, it puts my cursor in the text input because I told it it's associated to that, right? Now, does anybody know why you want to do that? Yes. Control behavior for the user. More specifically, because that is exactly it, and that's encompassing so much, which is amazing. More specifically, if you have something and you're looking at a browser and somebody clicks on username instead of the input field, it selects the input field for them, right? Just, it's making it so that they have a giant area to click on in case they have giant fat thumbs and they're working on a mobile device or a tablet, and they just, it selects the appropriate field for them, right? For the older generation that can't see very well, or accessibility purposes, there's a lot of reasons you want to do this for all kinds of reasons. So if you ever have an input of any type, strongly recommend having a input label. Now, to code that, it's very simple. So we have a input ID equals input sample, right? So the ID identifier of that is called input sample. Then I have a label down below that says for input sample. That's it. That label can be anywhere else. Doesn't matter where. Except it has to be the same page. Right? And then as soon as that person clicks on it, it'll select the input tag. Very simple, very straightforward, but it's just a simple tag. Other ones, which I'll just briefly go over, section acts very much like div. Very much like div. By default, it's block line, which means it takes the full width. The difference is that section defines that section as a collection of different things. Simple, straightforward. The difference is div is a division of content on the page. The contents of it they might not relate, they might relate. Don't know. It's just a division of the content. It's a way for you to structure your code semantically. A section is a section of your content that's associated to each other. Inside that, for this one, I have lists, UL and OL. Anybody want to take a stab at what UL means? Unordered list. How would you, OL? Ordered list. Fairly straightforward. UL, unordered list. OL, ordered list. LI is list items. Exactly, right? And yes, you can do sublists by just putting a UL or an OL inside of a list element. How does that look? Simple. Unordered lists have bullets. Ordered lists have numbers. And you can change these later in CSS again, right? Sublists generally have a different bullet, but again, completely customizable. I use later. Cool. Links, same thing. Everybody's run into a link before, right? Giant navigation link, pasted in another place. Well, if you're running a navigation, did you know there's a nav tag? Yeah. It's called navigation for a reason, because, again, thanks to HTML5, which is actually, this is one of the new tags, it says the contents of this section, the contents in this tag, are navigation. Which means if you have a list in there of links, Google, Bing, search engines, semantically, know that the contents are navigation either around your site or external sites based upon the link type or the links that you use. So now when you're doing, say, a website and you need that sitemap, well, your header navigation or your footer navigation, because you're using nav, that actually acts very much like the structured sitemap that you used to have to build ages ago. It gives the context. It says, hey, here's navigation. You want to read my navigation? Right here. Semantically, everything knows where to go. Cool? Interesting? Clap your hands for navigation. Awesome. Now, table is fairly old. I'm going to go over this really quickly because I'm kind of running out of time on my session yet. Table, very quickly. It's a table of information, right? Every single table, probably Excel, Word, all the PowerPoint, all these things use tables. It's a way for you to create a tabular set of data. The difference is, I'm going to tell you right now, if you ever have a table header, use table T-head. This helps you so much. Body of your table, use body. If you don't have a header for your table, because it's just a table or a list of data, don't put it. Just use table body. And again, it comes down to context, right? So we have table. In this case, I'm adding a border and a width, just to make it easy for you guys to see. T-head is table header. TR, table row. TH, table header, which is weird, but I know. It's table head cell, essentially. T-body is table body. Table row again. And TD. Does anybody know what TD stands for? Yes. You got it, exactly. Everybody says, why isn't it TC? Because that is technically a column. But it isn't a column, is it? Because a column would be the whole thing, right? If table data is inside of it, right? That's why it's TD. T-foot is what? Everybody want to take a stab? Sorry? Nobody wants to take a guess at what T-foot stands for? Table footer, exactly. Not very much used, but can come in handy if you want to have something at the bottom, if you have a giant long table, to just say, hey, this isn't table data. So if for instance, semantic device like a reader or accessibility reader wants to read the content, it knows, hey, this is not part of the table data. Do not read this unless they request for the table footer to be read, right? Which does come into play. So a couple more that they're not really as important, but you should run and know about. Article. An article is one of my favorite ones. It's a group of content that is related to each other and can be taken out of the site as a standalone element, and it still makes sense, right? So if you're running a blog, the content of a blog post is an article that you can take out, put somewhere else, and it still makes sense. Makes sense? That doesn't apply for section. Section is just a general area of content that's related to each other. Article can be extracted and anywhere it needs to. Details isn't very well used, however, I love it. I love it. This is my details thing here. See, if I just click, see how it shows and hides and has a little arrow? That's default in the browser. There's no extra special coding with that. It provides me functionality. And the reason I love it is because if you're creating a mobile device, or creating a site for a mobile device, you can do things like, oh, look, here's a mobile schedule for Maker Faire Toronto that happened this past weekend. Inside plug at all. Right? So if I'm in here and I say I'm scrolling down, it's day 2, and I want to see when the robot cavalcade was, I can see here's the time, here's the name, here's what it was. Click. Oh, here's the details for it too, without having to run any JavaScript or extra stuff on top of it, which means it's really fast to load and supported by all major phone browsers. Cool? If the browser doesn't recognize details, it still shows the content. Right? Because we're using things semantically, it knows, hey, the summary of the contents, here's the summary of it. That's what shows at the beginning. The contents after that, anywhere after that, can be paragraphs, can be divs, can be links, can be snippets, whatever it is. Awesome. Next thing up, everybody's seen these before. Images. Anybody recognize this one? Self-plug again, I guess. Image tags are another one of those ones that don't require that do not require that closing tag. They have the slash at the end, right? Video tag. Now, I don't think I have audio with this. However, I do have a special treat for everybody here. We now have a new promotion video that I will play because I spent so much time on it. There is music with this, and please go see actually. Yay! New video. I did kind of bad for that too, because it's really late at night to finish that. And so we have the video tag, which is native video inside your browser, and audio tags. Again, all within the browser, natively, no flash, no extra plugins, no nothing. So you can put your multimedia in directly to that. Again, that is simply a video tag and audio tag, which is this. Video tag and audio tag, just as they say here. The source, just like an image. And then I'm setting a couple of things here, which you'll notice in the code that you all have downloaded now. Width, height, and in this case, we have a poster. The poster is actually the background of the video before it's in. So you'll notice on this video, if I refresh this page, scroll down, that appears nowhere in the video, right? But that's still what's showing on the page when it's not playing. Yes? Depending upon the browser, there are a multitude of different ones that are available. Generally, MP3s are the most common. However, there are different ones on a per browser basis. There is M4A, which is yes. M4A, which is but it's an audio file for that. There is more video tag problems than audio tag problems. Sorry, availabilities, not problems. Features such as OGV for video, MP4, M4V, MOV, AVI. It really comes down to almost on a browser-by-browser basis. But the two standards that you can pretty much rely upon are MP4 and OGG. Right? That's the two ones for video. If you have those two in there, you're pretty much covering all the browsers. All the important ones, at least. Cool. If you do need any more information on what tags are available and the semantics and what each one means, there's a full list of HTML tag link at the bottom of the file that you have, which shows you the giant list of all those HTML tags. Which, please, everyone, say thank you for not reading through every one of these. I could have. What I wanted to do was give you guys a list, and I know it's fairly long, but this list is essentially all the ones that are important to you. These ones here, even these ones, if you use these ones only, I'm thrilled with the syntax. These are going to be exactly what you need to build your content website today and moving forward. Cool? Awesome. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to let you go through some of those files right now, take a look at some of the tags, read up on some of them. We're going to spend about, say, 10, 15 minutes. We'll get used to diving into some of the code, play around, change some stuff. Simply say, hey, this is a header level 1. What should be in my header level 1? Most important thing, which is your name, right? So again, refresh, your name. Cool. So on that note, I'm going to say, dive into some of the code, experiment with it. We'll recap back here at 35 minutes after 8 with some first introductions to CSS.